I also heard you're running for mayor this year.
You know, in our city, if I'm announcing I'm running for mayor, I must resign my seat.
Wow. Wow.
What that means, I'm not exploring whether I'm going to run for mayor. I'm exploring that I can win. So crime right now is the #1 issue in this city. But the mayor of this city, that is his policy. He's influenced by, you know, people, we call them thought leaders. They say this is good, but the results are bad. Okay, in a democracy, you can try your ideas when you win the election.
Yes.
But you should also, when your ideas are a failure, you should also have the responsibility to recognize it's not working.
Sure. M킴TV 구독자 및 시청자 여러분 안녕하세요. 오늘 제 옆에 아주 특별한 분을 모셨습니다. 필라델피아 시의 시의원이신 우리 데이비드 오 한국계 미국인 의원님을 모셨는데요. Could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you very much. My name's David O, and I'm a councilman for the whole city. We call it Councilman at Large here in Philadelphia.
What brings you to politics?
I think, you know, I was an attorney. It was my dream to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And I was building my firm. My father was a pastor, and as a lawyer, I wanted to build a good firm, help people, and make a lot of money too. But I eventually found that I was building a golden calf to myself in honor of myself. And I really thought about what can I do, because God had blessed me with many good experiences, but what can I do that he would want me to do? And one day I was listening to the radio, and by the way, let me say that when God wants you to think about something, he gives you a hard time. So my firm was suddenly not growing, and you know, we were slipping backwards, and usually that's when I think about what did I do? I should have done something. And, well, nothing was working. And then on the radio, I heard them talking about gambling was going to save Philadelphia. And I said, well, that's not true. Somebody should really talk about where jobs come from, how to make a better economy, and create a better education system.
Right.
So that's how I got interested in politics. I just wanted to run for office, which would give me a platform about talking about serious issues. And I thought if I did a good job, maybe the more serious candidates, the more well-funded and politically backed candidates would adopt some ideas. Wow. That was really my purpose. I thought I will run, do my best, probably lose, and then God will bless me, and I will have my firm growing again. And so I did run, and it was very difficult, but I did surprisingly well for someone who is not supported by political parties, didn't have the backing of business or unions or things like that. And after the election was over, the powerful entities began to attack my law practice.
Oh.
So I was losing contracts, I was losing work.
That's fierce.
And, you know, 4 years later, I ran again. And I did win on election day by just 6 votes.
Wow.
But the next day, they called me and said they did not count any absentee ballots. That means some people can vote from home. And so they began to count. God. So I ended up losing by 122 absentee ballot votes. And 4 years later, I ran again, and this time I won. And then I stayed the winner. And then the next 2 elections, I remained the winner.
Wow.
But I have had a hard fight each time with the politically powerful entities, because they usually have a group of people in mind, and I did not fit that profile. First of all, as a Korean American, I was not fitting that profile. I don't really know them, and I have very different ideas from them, and so I'm not really kind of included. But after 20 years, I think, you know, we have come to some kind of understanding. 20 years later, I don't think they're going to be opposing me in this next election.
Wow. So was it hard to be a Republican in this Democratic majority city.
No, not
No?
hard.
Wow.
You know, I think because you know, my father was a pastor, so I grew up in the church. I grew up in a bad neighborhood, which is all African American. You know, I was oftentimes the only Asian American in most settings, and I got along fine with everyone. But we lived in a kind of a crime-ridden area, and so being an outcast or being not someone who fits in is something I'm very comfortable with.
You're
and
used to it.
Used to it, and I enjoy it.
Wow. So I heard some crazy stories about your past experiences living in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah,
Could you tell us about
Sure. If you live in a bad neighborhood, go to bad school, things are going to happen. You know, I was kicked out of school several times for bad behavior, and
that?
oftentimes
Really?
that
You?
was
With
yes.
bad behavior?
I have a short temper, so what happens is, as a child and as a teenager, you know, things happen, and I have a reaction, right? And I only say that because I try very hard not to be that person. And you know, you could say I have a mental deficiency. If there's some trouble, I react badly, and it's unwise to react that way. So if there's 5 or 6 people, it doesn't matter to me. My friends were eventually all in gangs, and they ended up killing each other. So at a young age, at 13 or 14, there's a murder and things like that.
Literally killing
Literally
each other.
killing each other,
with
yes.
guns.
Something, right?
Wow.
And, you know, as I grew up, there was many problems in the neighborhood, crack issues, gang issues. Kind of even after I was an adult, as a council member, I was stabbed in front of my house. That made a lot of news. I went to the emergency room, and I was in critical condition, but they did a good job with the surgery, and I'm fine.
Which part of the body was it?
It was a kind of my left side.
I know you're a martial art man and
Yes.
strong and everything, but did it hurt?
No. You get stabbed with a sharp object, it doesn't hurt. You know, what happens is, you know, he did an underswing, and so he hit me in the ribs, and it's mostly like this.
Ow.
So nobody does that unless they're stabbing you with a sharp object, so it doesn't feel like anything, but right away I knew. I said, oh, you just stabbed me.
Wow.
You know, I will say that, you know, growing up in a setting where my father, as a pastor, you know, I believe that there is a God. I believe that there is Jesus. I believe the most important thing is that we are saved.
Amen.
And I believe God loves the person who stabbed me as much as he loves me. And God would like me to love him too. God has forgiven me, and God wants me to forgive the person who stabbed me. It doesn't mean God wants murderers walking around the city. You know, I don't think the issue is that I love this person. I try.
Yes.
I think the more important thing is I try to show the person that God loves me, God has forgiven me, and God loves you. So that is the message we try to share, that
I feel like I'm talking to a pastor now.
you're talking to the son of a pastor. It's
Son of a pastor.
It's almost the same thing. So the second thing I'll say is this. You know, the Bible always says we are outcasts. We are not to be popular. We can be popular, but we're not pursuing popularity.
Exactly.
We should be able to speak the truth. That's very difficult to do many times.
Yes.
You don't want to be a party pooper, and you don't want to, you know, make people upset, but you can't just agree with them because everybody's in agreement. So the idea of being, you know, someone who has a very different opinion, a very different mission, a very different purpose, is something that I have grown up with, so I am comfortable with it. And I think one of the most important things is, number one, we should know that we are a faulty person.
Yes.
We make a lot of mistakes. We're not trying to... Our testimony is not that I am so good. The testimony is I'm as bad as you, but God loves you and me the same. And that's an important message, right? So if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in Jesus, that's fine for our discussion purpose. What I'm saying is, since I do believe that, you know, I am very comfortable with the idea that nobody likes me. Therefore, I'm a very free person in a sense.
Wow.
Because, what other people think of me or something like that is not very important to me.
So it seems like God has prepared you to become strong and become who you are right now.
Right. I think he prepares everybody for that.
Yes. For our young generation viewers,
Yep.
what exactly is a city councilman at large or a city councilman? What do you do?
So I'm a legislator. What happens is our city itself is like 1.6 million people. And we have a mayor who is like our president, right? The mayor has the power of the executive. He has like 30,000 employees. I'm one of 17 legislators, so we make laws. We will do other things, but we do not have executive power. We cannot tell the police what to do. We cannot tell the city what to do. We do approve the budget, but the mayor spends the money.
I see.
There's nothing I can do without a majority vote. So no matter what I think, whatever I want to try to do, I have to introduce some document to do it.
Right.
If I want to introduce a law, I have to introduce a bill.
Yes.
If I want to hold a hearing, I
Yes.
introduce a resolution. If
I
my
see.
colleagues do not want to do it, then if they don't vote for it, I cannot do it. So
I
I'm
see.
very limited by 16 other people. So no matter how good the idea is, no matter how much people want it, if I introduce the bill and my colleagues do not pass it and they don't want to do it, they can either vote against it. If they don't want to vote against it because it doesn't look good politically, they can table it. That means get to it some other time,
Wow.
which is a nice way to say no without being on the record. And so I'm very limited that way.
I see. How many would you say out of the whole 17 councilmen are Republican or Democrat?
14 Democrats, and there is one Working Families Party member who is kind of more left of Democrat, more progressive socialist, yes.
Oh, so it's like 2 to 15, basically.
Yes.
So it must be very hard for you to pass a bill.
It is sometimes very difficult. If they don't like the bill, then it's understandable.
I see.
The problem for me is when they like the bill, but they don't want to pass it because they don't want to give credit to me, and they would like to keep credit among themselves.
Really?
Well, that happens a lot in politics. That's
So they
that's not
steal the
surprising. They may, as you said, steal the bill, or mostly they just vote against it and nothing happens. Well, it is politics. So in other words, this is not a place for amateurs. You should know what you're doing, and you should understand what you're getting into.
Wow.
I think many people think I can make this change. Well, you cannot make this change all by yourself,
Right.
and so it depends on kind of, where you are within the process, how comfortable you are, with doing things. Being a council person, we have two types of council persons. We have district council people. So we have 10 districts in Philadelphia, and there's a council person for each district.
It's just
I'm a at-large, which means I represent the whole city.
Wow.
So there are 7 of us who represent the whole city. It is actually the district council people who have the power, but only in 1/10 of the city.
Wow.
I have less power than them, but I represent the whole city, so I have more representation than they do.
I see.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the problem of this city? What problems do you see the most in
Well,
this
I see many problems, and I think the problems are there because people can only elect representatives from what they hear.
Yes.
And many times people are looking for a label. So if you have the right label, they're more inclined to vote for you. If you say the right things, they're more inclined to vote for you. If you say what's popular today, they're more inclined to vote for you. But what's popular today may not be right, may not be reasonable, may not be popular tomorrow. The question is, you may have someone who can make your life better, but they're not saying the things that appeal to you.
True.
Therefore, if you hear someone who presents well, fiery rhetoric, raising their fist, shouting, they might get a lot of votes.
Wow.
But, their performance in the job may be, very much contrary to making things better. So one is in the democratic process, you need a very engaged public
Yes.
that is interested and at least tries to understand what's happening. The next thing is those people who run for office are usually seeking support.
Yes.
And when they seek support, for example, the entity that supports them may have conditions or preferences in order to endorse or give money or things like that.
Right.
And so in the process, the person running for office will understand that this entity that's going to endorse me and give me all these votes, they don't want me to do something. Now they can say,
Sure.
Guess what? I'd love your endorsement and your money, but this is what I'm going to do. And that organization will probably say, well, in that case, we're not going to select you. Why would we select you when you're against our interest, right? So when the person gets elected, are they going to make very systemic changes, very deep-rooted changes? Well, they could, but mostly they don't. You know, because everybody's a human being. It's hard to be an independent person who is willing to lose, who is willing to be unpopular, and who is willing to be rejected,
Sure.
especially in public, right? So you have to be willing to do all this in front of everybody.
Right.
So how do we take it to the issues that confront the city? Well, one, we have a violent crime problem. We have a high murder rate right now. It's very dangerous. You know, many people, they don't want to come out of their house. They don't want their kids to take public transportation. They're afraid when they go to play basketball or go down to the store. We have a lot of those issues. So crime right now is the number one issue in this city. And there is a way to handle crime, and that is called police. You know, and the problem is the word police has become very unpopular.
Yes.
And people want to agree that the police is the wrong answer. I will ask them, what is the right answer? You know, and they will not be able to tell me. Of course, they say things. It's not policing, it's education, literacy. Of course it is. Can you produce that right now? No, you can't. You cannot produce good education. You cannot give someone literacy right now. You can't give them skills and a good paying job today. You can't do that. They will kill someone today. They will stab someone today. They will rape someone today. That you have to provide a deterrent.
Okay.
You know, so some people say, well, it's not police, it's gun laws. Let's pass all the laws you like. Who's going to enforce those laws? Not you. So who is going to enforce the laws that you want to see? And by the way, these are law breakers, right? So they're not actually following the law to begin with. We have a lot of laws that are violated because there is no enforcement.
Wow.
So where I agree with people is you do not want abusive police. And whose fault is that? That's the mayor's fault. That's the city government's fault. It's not my fault. You know why? Because I introduce bills about that. I try to correct that.
I see.
But it doesn't pass. But if you are a council member that is trying to defund the police and restrict their ability to do work, and you're not properly managing them, you are not providing proper training, you're not providing proper equipment. If what you're doing is getting on board the popularity train and saying I'm defunding the police and I don't believe in police, you have no solution to violence. So where there is a disconnect between government and people is the government wants to do what's popular.
Yes.
And the people want results. So when we look at the Pew Foundation study, which is a survey and a poll, 81% of African Americans in Philadelphia believe they do not have adequate police services. 81%.
Wow.
They want more police. Why are they not getting more police? Because the people who are comfortable and who are electing this government and who respond to them do not want more police. I just met with the Mexican community. You know, they have their stores broken, they have people harassing them, they have discriminatory acts. They asked me, how come there are no police here? We want the police cars, we want police. Well, the answer is actually because your neighbors, they don't want to see any police.
Wow.
That means we have a difference between Mexican immigrants who are running small businesses and wealthy people who live there,
Yes.
who are comfortable, who they don't want to see police. but they are a minority. The majority of this city does not live in comfortable areas or commercial areas. They live in neighborhoods with poor schools, unclean environments, poorly maintained parks and recreation centers, a lack of jobs and affordable housing. They have all kind of problems. They're used to all of this. People not stopping at the red light, unlicensed vehicles, crime shootings. They already have it. So they're not for that. What they want is they want a peaceful community. They want the laws enforced so that they can live in the best manner possible. So I'll say that government really has three things when it comes to crime. Carrot, stick, and timeout. Timeout is prison. If you are going to continue to insist on shooting people, stabbing people, and hurting people, no matter what we do, you got to go to timeout. We have a stick. If you do not respond to the carrot, we keep you in line with the stick. You will be arrested. You may be fined. You will face a level of punishment. So some people will respond to the stick, but this city has gotten rid of the stick. Doesn't want to use timeout.
Wow.
So these are people who will not respond to the carrot. So what is the carrot? The carrot is good schools, good neighborhoods, good jobs, bright future, stimulating environment. Well, we don't have a carrot either in most of our neighborhoods. We have bad schools, we have dangerous neighborhoods, we have filthy conditions, and we have drug addiction, and we have all kind of things that the permissive society has allowed because they think it's better to let people do drugs than to stop them from doing drugs. They think that is more humane. The end result, it is far less humane, and we have more and more drug addicted people who are coming to our city and instead of remaining in their communities, because we are attempting to come here where they can do whatever they like, to get drugs, to prostitute, to steal, to live on the street, to defecate right in the front of somebody's house, to commit all kind of crimes. And because of that, they need drug dealers. And so the city is not limiting drug dealers. The drug dealers make so much money, they kill each other over who can sell drugs. So we have a huge murder rate.
The vicious cycle that's going on.
It's an increasing cycle. In other words,
yes.
Instead of someone staying in where their family and their community is because it's hard to get drugs, they come to Philadelphia where they can get drugs easily, they can prostitute easily, they are not going to be harassed by law enforcement, they ruin the community, children cannot go to school, they're harassed, the people can't go outside their homes, businesses are closing. So I told you to look up Kensington.
Yes.
It's like zombie land. That is a failure. And then, but the mayor of this city, that is his policy. He's influenced by, people, we call them thought leaders. They say this is good, but the results are bad. Okay, in a democracy, you can try your ideas when you win the election.
Yes.
But you should also, when your ideas are a failure, you should also have the responsibility to recognize this is not working.
Sure. I also heard you're running for mayor this year.
In our city, if I'm announcing I'm running for mayor, I must resign my seat.
Wow.
What that means, I'm not exploring whether I'm going to run for mayor. I'm exploring that I can win.
If you get to run,
yes,
what would be your main issue or agenda?
One, I think a government must do a better job. And therefore, there are things that we can and should be doing today that we're simply not doing. So one is we should make this city safe.
Yes.
In order to do that, we have to simplify what is the responsibility of police officers.
Yes.
They have laws to enforce, and they should enforce them. That's not complicated. It's not an easy job,
right?
But you should let people know what the laws are, and they know. You should let people know what the penalties are, and then you should enforce it fairly and in accordance with the law, and purposefully.
Right.
Enforcing the law does not mean you are abusing people. If we let people ride a motorcycle through 10 red lights in a row, that is bad for them and is bad for other people.
Right.
We can give them a ticket. That's enforcing the law. What we cannot do is just pretend that didn't happen. You know, so when 100 people get together and ride through 10 lights, that has to be stopped. You cannot excuse it saying, well, they're just having fun as young men. You can't say that. You can't make it racist by saying that's what black young men do. No, they're breaking the law. That is not an excuse. That is not allowable. You cannot say, oh, in some way this is their culture. It's not their culture to break the law, to risk injury to themselves and others. So, and they are armed with guns. People tell me, how do you know they're armed with guns? Because they show it to you. They're not hiding. First of all, they're not getting arrested for illegal guns, and they're not getting prosecuted for illegal guns. Second of all, they're not stupid. They're coming into a city riding 300 or 500.
Wow.
They're riding with or a gun, or they're riding with someone with a gun. So, you know, it is not, there's really two problems with allowing crime. One, we don't want to have victims. Two, we don't want to have offenders.
Yes.
So when we allow crime to happen, we have someone who gets hurt, we have someone who hurts someone,
Right.
which is leading them down a bad road. It will not be good for them. They will not have a good life. Two, our subway system decided that they will shelter the homeless, the drug addicted, and the mentally ill. Listen, is that a kind thought? Yes, it is. It's a really bad idea. People go into the subway system with children, with the elderly, sometimes people with a wheelchair. They're trying to get from one place to another. They're not there to be harassed. They're not there to smell someone smoking marijuana or whatever. They're not there to smell pee or step in poop. That's not why they're there. They don't want to see people having sex. You know, they don't want to be stabbed or robbed. That place must be safe and clean, so people can use it for public transportation.
True.
And right now, because of the policies of our transportation system, very much in line with our mayor and other people, because they're trying to do what they think is popular. Oh, we have a subway system, we have heat, we'll let the homeless and mentally ill and drug addicted live there.
Wow.
No, that's not humane. And as a result, people don't want to ride the subway system. They can't get to work. It's more expensive. They're worried about their children. And as a result, the subway system does not have enough money. So now they want to change the subway pattern, buses and trains. That makes it worse for everyone. They are losing money at such a rate, they want to cut services. So actually, that is absolutely a bad idea, and it hurts the public. What did they get out of it? Just a prideful reputation that is popular in Hollywood and California and some other place, that Philadelphia's subway, the transit system is very progressive. They get awards. But the reality is that's fake. You know, they're replacing the police with safety guides. These are untrained people, they're unarmed, they're not able to intervene when people are getting attacked. So someone's getting millions of dollars to provide, you know, someone who can't help you. And I say that because we know what the people want.
Right.
They want safety. And we want them, they should not have the stress. Even if nothing happened to them, you know, 10 days in a row.
Yes.
People who can take an Uber, they have a choice. They have enough money to have a choice. These people do not have a choice. And therefore, schools, you know, we have very disparate schools, very unequitable. You can look at the school. One school has an orchestra, a swimming pool, a 3D printer, beautiful location, clean bathroom with toilet paper. There are many schools in our city. The bathroom is locked. There's no toilet paper. The library is used as the teacher's lounge. The building is dangerous. You know, there's bullying. There's crime.
Wow.
You know, the quality of the education is poor. That's completely unacceptable, and it is a violation of both the Constitution and the federal law. That should not be allowed. So why can't that be handled? It can be handled. Not a problem. You need someone who is willing to fight with those stakeholders that have allowed these conditions to exist for decades.
What would be the cause of this whole school being so deteriorated and destroyed?
Well, what happens is you have a system that is supposed to provide equal conditions of education. But we have a system in reality that had favored one group of people over another.
I see.
In the past, it was white people over black people. And so white neighborhoods got good schools, black neighborhoods did not. But as things changed and as laws were passed, the division remained.
Right.
And it was not the mayor's responsibility, according to the mayor, to make this even.
Oh.
And then there were appointees to the school board,
Okay.
and they didn't make any difference. And the people who ended up in those schools didn't challenge that. And the parents, if there are parents, because sometimes they're not, they demand and demand, but they don't have the political power to make the change.
Right.
So someone has to go in there and basically dedicate a certain amount of funding to building new schools.
I see.
And to knock down the schools that should be knocked down. But you know, sometimes continually repairing a broken school is how you get a lot of money to a lot of people. Like if you have a car and it's 20 years old, and I can keep charging you for fixing it, as long as somebody else is paying, I'll keep fixing your car. Maybe it costs $100,000
Wow.
to keep fixing your car, like we keep fixing these school buildings. But in the school buildings, there's inferior education, and that should not happen. And look, as someone who is in a wealthy community with wealthy parents, they don't need a lot from their schools. But when they go home, it's safe, it's clean, they have computers, they have games, you know, they have very interested parents. That is not true for most of our kids. When they go home, there isn't a place to study, it's not safe. Many times, you know, in a poor household, there isn't enough to eat. There aren't computers. Now, yes, they have phones, but these kids don't use these phones for education.
Wow.
They use it for social media. So school becomes more important. Learning and the love of learning and what you learn that is useful, including skills, career, academics, language, culture, history, math, science. There's not enough hours in the day to learn. And a lot of kids want to learn. You have to give them things that are fun and interesting.
Yes.
Some things that are hard and challenging, you have to stimulate them in many ways. That takes violins, it guitars, it takes, you know, games, it takes, high-tech equipment, it takes design, it takes 3D printers. They respond very well to new gadgets.
Yes.
And someone has to guide them through it. So longer school hours,
Yeah.
weekend opportunities, summer enrichment on a voluntary basis. We need qualified, certified teachers who volunteer
Yes.
to go to the toughest, roughest areas of our city with wonderful children who just lack a good environment. We will pay them more, we will give them more benefits so that they can provide what these children need. However, in the past, the teachers union has fought against it, so maybe they will fight against it again.
Because they don't want the long hours.
Because they don't want the long hours, even if you volunteer for it. So, you know, that is the reason why politicians do not do what is obvious, right? America has both the best and the worst. We have some of the best public school systems in the world and some of the worst. The question is, how do they exist side by side? Why do they exist side by side? But here in the city of Philadelphia, it's one city. Every post office you go to will look about the same. You go to a rich neighborhood, a poor neighborhood, they look the same, you get the same services. Yeah, go to the post office in a real rich part of town. But the schools are not. Now, however it got that way, it must change, and somebody must change it.
Right.
But then you will have a fight, and it's interesting, right? Because why would you fight the media and social service people and you know, workers? Why would you fight with them to provide children better resources, better equipment, and better educational opportunities? I'm not going to explain why. I'm just going to say we don't have to keep it that way. But you're going to have someone who actually takes on that fight and makes that change.
Exactly, right.
Yes. Well, I went from crime to schools. Next is jobs. You know, a lot of people who are very interested in social justice and all that stuff, which is important. I'm not saying it's not. They never talk about jobs. They talk about rotten corporations and capitalism is terrible. Okay, but we do need jobs. We need employers. We need jobs that pay well, even if you don't have a high school degree, even if you have a criminal record. We need to have jobs that can bring you a new future and have a pathway somewhere. Many of these jobs are where people can actually get paid well for things that are not kind of more like 9-to-5 jobs. And there we find that people sometimes are very imaginative.
Yes.
Sometimes, you know, the very hard experiences they have turn into, you know, amazing written word or song. But you cannot take a position like physician and give it to someone who's untrained and unlicensed. That is what, you know, people are trying to do today. That is not a good idea. You know, doctors should be trained and licensed, and they have a very important thing, your life and your health in their hands.
Sure.
That's not a place to start taking people by identity and saying that someone who's uneducated is just as good as someone who's not. They're not. But they might be wonderful in sports or as a coach. They might be wonderful in, you know, as a musician or, you know, in a skilled labor position where they do fantastic. And many of them would be great business people, not all of them, but some of them be fantastic entrepreneurs. The first place they start is with a job, getting paid, having health care, things like that. That is not going to happen organically.
Right.
There has to be a very active role in this city to go out and attract those type of opportunities to our city. It has to be purposeful. And you know what? It's going to have to be international. I could stop there because there's a lot of things I could say. It'd be a long, long interview.
I know, but I would move to the next topic,
Sure.
which is, who is your political role model?
My political role model is Abraham Lincoln. I love Abraham Lincoln. Well, the one is he's a very important person in history, especially in America.
Okay.
And he is very much an outsider and a loner. He is very much a person who's lived a very tragic and sorrowful life. And most of his life was actually as a failure. But he became president, and he had a very hard presidency, but he was able to guide this country properly. So I would say he's the unlikely president at the most difficult time in this country's history, arguably most difficult. And his values were very good at the beginning and evolved to be much better at the end, right? In other words, you know, I went to a school that really hated Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
And I went to school at a time where it was popular to speak against Abraham Lincoln. And I read a lot of books because we were required to read them about what a horrible person he was a racist, blah, blah, blah. I read through all that stuff. And many years later, you know, it's such a contradiction, right? You read the Gettysburg Address, you read some of the things he said, you hear some of the stories. Those are really wonderful words, wonderful concepts. You know, he's a champion against slavery, and they're saying he's a racist. So what I did at a certain point in time, I took a book of all his letters and speeches, and I read them myself.
Wow.
And I found that there's much more truth in reading someone's original writings. I am not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 40 years ago. You cannot take a person when they're 20 years old and say that's who they are at 60. You cannot take a person when they're 35 and say that's who they are when they're 40.
That's a good point.
It's an evolving thing, right? And so you look at a person, and sometimes they are terrible people who end up being good people.
Yes.
Sometimes they appear to be good people and turn out to be terrible people.
Sure.
And sometimes, rarely, they are great people who turned out to be even greater,
Yes.
right? He was never supportive. He was always against slavery and the cruelty, of one man to another. Always against it.
Right.
But he did not believe in mixing races. He said the black people should be with black people, white people should be white people, because he thought was better. He didn't hate people. But during the Civil War, when he saw black soldiers, many African American soldiers dying,
Right.
he said, if they're going to die for our country, they are part of our country. So he completely reversed his position.
Wow.
He no longer believed in the separation of the races, the best policy. So people will take something, even though he grew up uneducated, in poverty, a laborer, self-educated, became a lawyer in a slave state. But he was always against slavery, and people say, well, he was an Indian fighter. Yes, he was. He was in the military. He was not a hater of Native people.
True. And it's sad that a lot of universities, colleges,
They have a purpose, they have a mission that's really man-made, handcrafted indoctrination.
why do you think they would want to indoctrinate
They want to
people?
shape people in their image for their purpose. But I would just say that, look, as a father, that is not what I do. I would like my children to be a certain way.
Yes.
But that's their journey,
Yeah.
right? My job is not to tell them what to think. I could, but eventually they're going to figure it out themselves.
Right.
It is better for me to guide them to come to conclusions.
Yes.
Some of the conclusions I might not like, but the journey's not over. I simply try to guide them. So do I want somebody who does not love them as much or care as much to tell them how to think and spend all their time crafting their mind with misinformation? I simply say to my children, do you think that's true? Did you think about it? Did you check it out? My daughter says to me like 3 days later, you know what? That's not true. I looked it up. At least on my part, I think that the best city is the city where people can live the best life. So while I'm very focused on buildings and technology and things like that, those are things that allow people to be the best type of person they can be.
Yes.
So if you can go to another city and be a wonderful human being that you dream of being, that is a great city. I would like to make this city that kind of city. So people who live here can live well, they can see their children live well, and people would want to come and live with us and grow with us, saying like Philadelphia is a fantastic place.
Wow. Well, thank you. I have so many more questions that I wanted to ask, but because of our time limit,
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay,
Councilman.
thank you very
And
much.
I hope to see you again.
Okay,
soon.
sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.